Alright, in 3.25, we have a modification to Perfect Agony, which is going to make NightBlade Support extremely powerful. The change to Perfect Agony is now damage over time multiplier for ailments is equal to your critical strike multiplier. Critical strikes do not deal extra damage, and non-critical strikes cannot inflict ailments. What that means is it pairs perfectly with Adder's Touch. Critical strikes with daggers poison enemies. So when you hit an enemy, if you crit, it poisons. If you don't crit, it doesn't poison. But it's already not going to poison if you don't crit. So if you grab this node, this is the only chance of poison you need. So you don't worry about getting 100% chance to poison. You're going to get it from this one node alone. Now another thing that is going to buff this whole setup with NightBlade is elusive effects on you reduce in effect 50% slower. That means double the high end of elusive. And then elusive is removed from you at 20% instead of 0%. That's going to cut out the 20% dog shit elusive at the back end. That means you're only going to be bouncing between 20% and 100%, giving you probably about a 20% more damage multiplier. Not quite 20% more, but this is actually, it might be even more than 20% more since it reduces 50% slower. Either way, this would be really strong. And then you're going to stack your elusive effect to the moon. From the elusive effect on the assassin passive tree, the elusive effect on the dagger nodes, and the elusive effect you're going to get from this claw. I would recommend doing this one down here because you could still benefit from some of these nodes. This right here, 5% increased poison duration. And then this one, that one doesn't do anything. So if you want, you can try to finagle your way to this claw, or you can use Veranastrum, but I think that's going to be extremely expensive. So I'd probably just recommend Beano's Kitchen Knife. This is also going to give you another 25% crit multi, which will be then transformed into 25% dot. And at the start of the build, you're going to want to use this amulet here. You can get up to 350% increased critical strike chance, and your critical strikes deal no extra damage. But that's not that big of a deal with the modification to Perfect Agony, because now when you don't crit, you're not going to apply an ailment, so it's not that big of a deal if your non-crits don't do damage. And then late game, you can replace this with this bad boy, which is going to give you 240% damage over time multiplier. This is going to be extremely juicy, but you're going to need to make sure your crit is extremely high, all your pieces that aligned. So I'd recommend doing this after you're at T16. You can ride this bad boy all the way up into T16, super easy. Then once you're geared up enough where you can switch and your critical strike chance is high enough, you switch to this and you are going to be extremely powerful. Now, I am going to recommend, if you try to this, I would do it this way. Instead of up here, because this doesn't apply a damage over time multiplier that can be assigned to bleed as well. And I personally would recommend getting bleed, because this damage over time multiplier will apply to both bleed and poison. And if you could just grab these bleed notes here, you're going to be able to trigger a bleed, and then you're going to be able to aggravate them, and then that's also going to increase your critical strike chance multiplier by 30%. So you're going to be applying a pretty heavy bleed, but bleed's not going to be your big boy. Poison's going to be your big boy, but bleed will be there to add more damage, and it might be pretty substantial. And even if it's not, this 80% increased critical strike chance against bleeding enemies is going to help when you switch over to this bad boy, because you're not going to have the crit that you quite need. Now, Beano's has usually been relatively cheap, not so much day one, but day two. This dagger is relatively cheap, and you can pick it up on the cheap, but you never know how prices is going to turn out now that Melee is back in a big way. And, you know, you never know what the prices are going to be. Beano's was pretty inexpensive. There are a couple of other daggers that might kind of work. They're all in the rune dagger section. So Beano's is definitely going to be the best dagger. But if you really want, you can use Akali's Fang. This will work. It has that high physical damage bonus in it. And, you know, that's kind of nice. Also has a pretty high base damage. Not going to be that great. It's also probably still very expensive, so that's not really a bonus to not use Beano's. I'm pretty sure Beano's will be cheaper than Akali's. But then the one that is guaranteed to be inexpensive is this one. It has a high physical base, and it will give you 50% chance to bleed on critical strike, which is going to make you hit them bleeds very, very frequently. And if you really wanted to, you can grab that knife and then not grab these nodes here, and you can save yourself quite a few points. In fact, if you do it this way, you can even avoid coming down to this area at all, cutting out this whole bottom section here, and then you just grab these for your claw nodes, like so, and then you have a lot more points to play with. If you want to go cluster jewels, you know, a bunch of other things, you can do that as well. Or you can not go up this way at all, and then focus on coming down this way, or doing more cluster jewels. There's a lot you can do. But basically, what you want to be grabbing is this guy, that guy, and that guy, and then NightBlade Support. And if you haven't seen NightBlade Support in a while, you're going to be getting 138% critical strike chance multiplier from Elusive. And I can't remember if the Elusive buff pumps this. Pretty sure it pumps it up even higher, but if it doesn't, either way, that's 138% crit multiplier. And we're cutting the bottom 10% off of Elusive, so it is extremely strong. This is a huge buff to the Assassin, and one of the reasons it's a buff to the Assassin is this node here, the 50% increase elusive effect. Now this 50% increase elusive effect gets even more attractive when you're cutting out this bottom 20% and slowing it down, because if your top end is like 500 elusive, that means the bottom end 20% is going to be an even larger number, and it's going to keep you up in those big boy numbers even longer. So the more elusive you get, the better this benefit is. Now it's probably going to take a while to get the new oils for these, I imagine, and people are going to be wanting to experiment with that. But early on, it might be a good idea to do some breach to get some of these oils, because I don't think people are going to be experimenting with these on a wide scale until some big POE creators start using them, and then all the sheeple copy that creator and then move it over. And hopefully by that time you could have farmed this new oil, and that new oil is probably going to shoot up in price as big content creators experiment with these new ones. Now, that is the Assassin. I think NightBlade is back in a big way. I'm probably not going to start that this league simply because of the rework to a few other classes. But if you are a fan of the NightBlade style, I would recommend Reeve, but there's several options you can use. If you're a fan of the NightBlade style, I think NightBlade is in. I think Elusive is in. I think this is going to be a really strong build. That is all. I will check you guys later.